Hey everyone, this is Fabriello and welcome back. Today I've decided to make a game review and I'm gonna talk about a game that I always wanted to review because it's one of my favorite games of all time and a personal favorite of mine, and I am talking about Final Fantasy IV on the DS. Many of you probably know this or remember this called Final Fantasy II on the Super Nintendo. But I'm gonna talk specifically about um, Final Fantasy IV on the DS, so the remake, and for reasons that I will explain later, especially because I want to compare the two versions and which one is actually my favorite. So the DS version, the remake, was released in 2007 in Japan, 2008 everywhere else, while the original Final Fantasy IV, that I always call 2, so if I say 2, 3, just it's mainly because of habit. I played those two on the Super Nintendo, and I'm used to call them that way, the old way, not the original. So I hope there's no confusion. But so the original Final Fantasy II was released in 1991 on the Super Nintendo in Japan and North America, not Europe, of course. And we all know the reason of the difficult, actually troubled release history of Final Fantasy games back then. We know that after Final Fantasy I on the NES, the franchise wasn't very successful. It wasn't a big um, series as it is today. Today it's massive, it's huge. Every Final Fantasy game that is released is an event. Back then was not very known. The first one that I actually heard about it was Final Fantasy II after 1991. So we all know that after Final Fantasy I, the second one that was released was 4, called 2, while 2 and 3 were released only in Japan, the same with 5, and then we have 6, was called 3 on the Super Nintendo. And then we got Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1, and thanks to its massive success, it was a massive hit, allowed the re-release of older games and the release of constant new games since it became an incredible successful franchise thanks to Final Fantasy VII. That's the thing that I'm most thankful for um, that game. So Final Fantasy IV, let's talk about that. What can I say about that has been already said? My main idea for this review is saying why I love this game so much. I say that it is one of my favorite games of all time. It is definitely true. This is easily one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and again, one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It is a masterpiece in just one word. Why do I love it so much? Well, there are different reasons. Um, the most obvious one is the story. I don't want to go too much into details talking about the story because it's very big, very long, and I don't want to spoil it very much because I think that everybody played this game. But in case you haven't played this, I don't want to ruin it for you since it's such a great story. You have to discover it. You have to play it. So you get this great story, but actually, to me, the best part of the game are the characters. So you have this great story that, in a nutshell, it's basically a massive good versus evil um, conflict kind of story. To just in explain in 2 seconds, but it's not just there. It's not only that. I think that you have a story that it's more like a big cover for it, a nice cover for what's inside. That it's really great, and this is the characters. You have 12 playable characters. That it's a lot for the time. You have to think that, for example, Final Fantasy 3 and 5 have both 4 characters, but 4 has 12, and that's a massive advantage. And some of them are so well done and developed, and that's, I think, the strongest point in this game. The character development is brilliant. You have the main character of the game, it's called Cecil Haraway, and you start, and this is very interesting, as a Dark Knight. So technically you're a bad guy. Also because, as you know, you start the game by being a sort of oppressor. You are the commander of a special elite force in this kingdom, whose main duty is to repress and defeat enemies of the King of Baron. So you're not a message. You're not one of the good guys, apparently, at the beginning, but that's already a great thing of the game, because Cecil is a very conflicted character, and it's one of the main theme of the game to me. The conflicts inside of Cecil and between Cecil and other characters, and it's done in a great way. You started already, as I said, the conflict inside of Cecil. It's because, yes, he is a Black Knight, but it's actually a good guy, of course, and is conflicted inside of him between his duty to the king and the kingdom and the morality of his actions. So he knows that what he's doing is wrong, is not is just hurting innocent people, like the beginning when you attack the Misty Village and you kill actually Rydia's mother. It's not big spoiler this, it's just the first 5 minutes of the game. So you done horrible things and you know that they're wrong, but at the same time he's really loyal to his king because he sees him as a father figure because he's adopted. So he really wants to be loyal to the king, but starts to have doubts about the morality of his action. And the attack at Rydia's village is what makes him say that that's enough, that's too much. I'm not just a murderer. I don't want to kill innocent people. And that's another great part about the game, the interaction between the characters. And the best of it to me is actually the one between Cecil and Rydia. Rydia is another of the main characters of the game, and you encounter her pretty early, and she's a dark mage kind of character, but also a summoner. And the relationship between her and Cecil, it's very nice and very well done. The main idea is, I think to me at least, it's a sort of father-daughter kind of relationship. And oh, wow, that's very noisy, obviously. Just wait a second. Very distracting. It's as I said, father-daughter figure because Cecil really wants to it really wants to make her forgive him for what it did to her, to her family, to her village. Since it killed her mother, it destroyed her village. So what he really wants is her forgiveness. And I think that's a great thing because pretty early, Rydia starts to um, get really close to Cecil as a sort of big brother, as a sort of father. And there's also the separation thing that happened during a certain moment in the game. Then she comes back. I mean, it's a great story between those two, a great interaction between two great characters. But obviously, you have other and even more twisted characters. For example, we have, of course, well, Rose is not twisted, of course. It's just a really nice lady, childhood friend of Cecil is, of course, in love with. So it's a really nice couple, the two of them. But of course, you have Kane, Cecil's best friend, and also a rival. And for part of the game is under the bad guy's control, so he's also your enemy. But then you got already another conflict here. You got Cecil and his best friend. Like, should I kill him? He's my best friend, but he's under the enemy control. And about all this great development. But then you have another, probably the second best, or at least my second favorite relation, that it's the one between Cecil and Golbez. Golbez, for the most part of the game, is the main villain. He's the one who is corrupting the kingdom of Baron and is trying to gather all the magic crystals in order to increase his power and conquer the world, basically. And as I say, he is the main villain. So there is a great villain and hero and villain relationship, and it's also the target for most of the hate of most part of the game. But spoiler alert again, at least like after 2/3 of the game or something towards the end, you actually make the discover that Golbez is actually Cecil's brother. So here's the other conflict. Cecil realized that it doesn't know what to do with him. Like he's done so many bad things. He's responsible for all the chaos and the wars, everything. But he's my brother. What should I do with him? Should I kill him? Should I forgive him? I mean, because you discovered that that Golbez was under the real bad guy control. It was this, let's call entity, this thing called Zemus, a sort of demon, if I remember well, that it was actually controlling Golbez. So it was not really in control of his action. That is, I think, a really deep and interesting thing. All the question about, well, it is true that it wasn't in control, but it did so many bad things. Should we forgive him or not? And I love the fact that at the end, before the final battle, is actually Golbez and who is actually fighting against Zemus before your team started the final battle. So you have all these great characters that interact with them in a really good and deep way. I mean, it's not just a childhood friend to do this and do that. There's a lot of conflict. There is a lot of interaction. There is a lot of questioning during this game. Really interesting and deep themes, I think, that makes this story really good and interesting. Then, in a real Final Fantasy fashion, you have a massive world. So the game is very long, of course, and not only you have this great world that you can explore in different way. You can start by foot, riding chocobos, using boats. You have like an overcraft, the classic boat, and everything. Then the best way, and it's classic Final Fantasy. You have your airship. That's present in all the games. I think since Final Fantasy 3 that introduced the character of Sid. And then you can explore the entire world. But it's not just there. You can explore even more because you discover there is an underground world, let's call it like that, where the dwarves are living. Because you have to go there and defend their crystal from the attack of Golbez. So there is already two worlds, basically. And then the coolest part in the game is the fact that you can actually go to the moon, and there you discover the big revelation that Cecil is actually part of people who is from the moon. And so Golbez, of course, and it is very interesting. I love the idea of going to the moon. So you got three worlds that you can explore, so it got a lot of gameplay. And these are my favorite parts of the game. I mean, there is this great story with amazing characters. And it sounds like a perfect game because it has all the things that I love. There is a nice, deep, but not too much complicated story that you want to discover more. You want to know what happened to these great and very well developed characters. Plus, you have, of course, a great soundtrack. I mean, that's not anything surprising. We're talking about a Final Fantasy game. All the Final Fantasy games have amazing and great soundtracks by Nobuo Uematsu, and 4 is no exception. In the previous video, I said that I prefer actually Final Fantasy V soundtrack to Final Fantasy IV. That's still true, but that doesn't mean that I don't like the soundtrack of this game. That it's brilliant. It's very beautiful music in this game. Some of the themes are very familiar, like the battle theme, the victory theme, um, and others. While others are just from this game, they're perfect for the different situation. And obviously, I mean, again, it's no surprise that Final Fantasy has some great music. It's just like saying, oh, do you know Ys? That's a great soundtrack. I mean, we know that. So it sounds like a perfect game. Well, I actually have one complaint that it's essential to me. And it's not a real thing. It's not a real problem to me. The only thing that I don't really love, let's say like this, because I love this game, but the only thing that I complain about is actually the graphics. And it's only with the DS version. I don't really like the graphics of this game, not because it's not good. It's nice, it's beautiful for a DS game, but I prefer the original Super Nintendo graphics. I prefer the graphics of Final Fantasy II. I prefer the 16-bit graphics to this one. It's like a 3D restyle. That it's nice. I'm not complaining, but I'm old school. I prefer all graphics in an old game. This is very old. As I said, it's 1991. I understand the restyle. They do. Square did the same thing with Square Enix for the remake of Final Fantasy III on the DS again, but it makes more sense to me restyling Final Fantasy III and not doing the same with Final Fantasy IV would be better to me. And then because maybe just what I think, Final Fantasy III was released on the NES on the Famicom, so probably was not really acceptable to have that kind of graphics. Well, I wouldn't mind, but that kind of graphics on the DS. So they think it was okay. Probably the general response of the public was nice, so they think, well, let's do the same with Final Fantasy IV. I didn't like this very much. I mean, it's a nice graphics, but it's too cute in a way. It's very poly. I would prefer probably if they kept the original 16-bit graphics. It's what they did with Chrono Trigger, for example. They didn't change the graphics. They kept the same 16-bit graphics. That's the reason why I love the remake so much. Even though I prefer, for different reasons, the original game. That's to me the big thing between remakes and original. I mean, especially of older games, you can't have the same sensations that you had back then with the remake, but it's still very nostalgic. So the graphics here, it's probably the only thing that I don't like in this game. It's not even that I don't like it. It's alright. It's nice graphics. I don't hate good graphics. Don't misunderstand my words. I mean, usually I say always like, oh, I don't care about graphics. Graphics don't make a good game. I like good graphics. I love good graphics games. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but just I'm very old school. I'm very nostalgic. I love not bad graphics, but old style graphics or some sort of old graphics. So when I say this, don't get me wrong. I love good graphics. I just want to make this clear. But sometimes, especially for some sort of games, I prefer more of an old school approach. Let's say this. Like in this case, I would have preferred if they maintained the old Super Nintendo graphics. That it wasn't bad. It was just very old school. But maybe they just have to. They have such a positive response with Final Fantasy 3 that they have to do it again. But maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe all of you guys prefer good restyling the old classics. And personally, I think it's not always necessary. But again, it's just me. So overall, this is a great game. One of the best Final Fantasy games. I haven't finished this yet, I have to admit. And I haven't finished Final Fantasy 2 as well, of course, because I played when I was very young. I didn't get it everything because it was also like all in English. Back then, my English wasn't perfect. It isn't even today, but I can understand entirely a game today. Back then, sometimes I didn't understand some part of the story, blah blah blah. So at the time, I stopped the first time you go to the moon. In this game, I actually reached the final battle. I just have to defeat Zemus once and for all. And it's really curious that I haven't finished it yet because I think I haven't played this game at least in a year, and I just have to beat the final boss. I don't know why I haven't played, mainly because I have other games and I'm very busy with other things. So, but it's very funny when I reach Zemus actually, because I remember that I was going to Buenos Aires by plane, so I had a lot of time from London, there like 13 hours, and I couldn't sleep. I hate sleeping on planes for long journeys. So I was playing my Final Fantasy IV on my DS, loved every second of it, and was on the moon, the final part of the game. I reached Zemus. I got murdered mainly, but also because the first battle with big bosses usually it's just like an exploration for me. I love to see how they behave, the attacks, best strategies and stuff. But after the first battle, I was so tired that I stopped playing it, and since then I haven't played the final part of the game um, that often, just once here and there. Also because the I reached the last and final save point that it's very far from the final boss, so you have to do plenty of battles with very tough enemies that will consume your life and magic points pretty quickly. So you always have to cure yourself again, so you'll not be at 100% at the time of the final battle. That it's not easy since the final battle. So that's probably the reason why I haven't played yet. But I really want to finish it because I love the game so much and I really want to beat it. I want to complete it. And that's my policy with all games, especially the one I love. So, great game for the DS. Great, great game. As you know, there is a sequel to Final Fantasy IV called After Years. It was released between 2008 and 2013 on different systems. So it started as a mobile phone games, then it was released on iOS and Androids, WiiWare, and in 2011 on the PSP. And I think this is the version that most people play. And I think it's very interesting. I want to add this part at the end that after Final Fantasy VII, again, it's all thanks to this game. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII, but thanks to this game, Final Fantasy became big and it's been explored and expanded in any possible way, and I'm really thankful for that. So, after that, we had many sequels in Final Fantasy games that started technically, technically, with Final Fantasy X, that we had 10 Part 2. Then other games got sequels, like 4, for example. Then 7 has plenty of sequels. Final Fantasy 13 Part 2, and many others. Although the official real sequel of Final Fantasy game was not 10 Part 2, but Final Fantasy 5 actually got a sequel in as an anime. So I don't know if it counts, but technically that's the first sequel, and it's also very interesting. I want to review that. Since it's a nice anime, it's still Final Fantasy, so it's good, and I love Final Fantasy 5. So we got to explore more of the world of Final Fantasy 4, which is a great thing. I suppose it's a very interesting world with great characters, and to play more, yes, please. Unfortunately, I haven't played that because I don't own a PSP, and I'll try to manage that because I really, really want to play. So at the end, as I said before, and because I'm really excited about this and talk about this, this is a great game. As an easily one of the best Final Fantasy game. It's my second favorite after 6, that it's my absolute favorite. One of the best RPG of all time, easily again. Everyone who owns a DS should have this game. If you haven't, buy this right now. It's a DS game. It's easy, it's fine, it's affordable, it's not expensive, and you really, really love this game if you start to play it. You really want to explore it, everything about it. I highly, highly recommend, but probably you already played this. It's a classic. Personally, for my personal reasons, I prefer Final Fantasy II, so the original Super Nintendo version, but that's just me. I'm old school. I'm really, really attached to my Super Nintendo, but it was very nostalgic to play this. In a way, I also enjoy the restyling and everything, but I'm just love the original one too much that it wasn't the same thing that the thing with remakes. They're not the same thing, but it's really nice. And technically, this is the first time that we European players actually play this one. So it's great to have this. So I'm really thankful to Square Enix to have released um, the real Final Fantasy IV on DS, so that we European players can actually enjoy this masterpiece of a game. Highly, highly recommended. So there you have it. This is my review of Final Fantasy IV. As I told you, didn't went too much into the story because it's very long. It will probably already talk a lot. This is a really long video, and just wanted to share my feelings about it since I love this game so much. And as I told you, I always wanted to review this, and also why I actually prefer the original, and the main reasons why I love in general Final Fantasy IV. I hope you enjoyed this review, guys. I'll see you next time and take care.